Hola, amigos and amigas. My name is Puesto Enrico. My voice sounds like that of another person right now. Not sure why. I feel as though I am speaking another man's thoughts. Which value ought we uphold? That's the question that I find myself asking. And I guess the reason I find myself asking this question is a general sense of discontent that is befouling my sense of an orderly self, rudderlessness, lack of clear direction. I mean, sure, killing flies is a quest of sorts, and an important one. I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. But it's not enough to build an entire life around, is it? Hi, Emailed Anthrax. Hi, Raphael. How are you today? Which dairy product are you made out of? Can you tell me that? Can somebody answer me that question? Which dairy product are Raphael and Emailed Anthrax made out of? Anyway, geez, okay, good. Life's a funny thing. And every time you think you understand it, you're wrong. Why? Because it's never quite clear which value one ought to uphold. Like, to the extent that I'm correct about lack of direction being a problem, what value does that indicate is primary? And is it in fact the case that I ought to uphold that value? I mean, I guess one would say it's a TE style value. But sour milk congealed into power. When you argued with Rachel, did you stream it to outplay your FI? I don't know what you mean by outplay. You mean like outsource? Or you mean just sort of vent? Get rid of the FI within me by making it external? Sort of. Yeah, that's a fair assessment of things. Well, I mean, my FI is real. It's not just a perception management thing. And I don't think FE in the chat really has a lot to do with why I do it. It's just that rendering FI things into FE, into any style ideation is a way that I can better understand it, maybe. I'm not sure. It's not like I feel a lot of satisfaction from other people's sympathy or perception management or something like that. Although that's a reasonable conclusion to draw, but I don't think it's actually accurate. But, it's often tricky figuring out one's own motivation for things. I guess that's an FI thing as well. So I finished listening to book 4 of the Wheel Time series out of like 16 books. Hi, Running Fox. And I'm, I guess, a little frustrated with myself because in my typically addictive nature, I now just want to spend all my time listening to these books and no time doing anything else. Yeah, Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. it's this massive series. It's like the depth of the world is very it's a very well realized and well explored world because there's 16 long books in the series. Where are you saying that the books after he died aren't any good? Well, I read it back in the day up until like book 8 or something. Hmm. I haven't gotten there. You couldn't finish it, huh? That's depressing to hear. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, regardless, I'm only on book 4. What do you make it through? Like 13 books or something? Robert Jordan before he died? What's the Got TV series? I haven't seen it. Does Wheel of Time have a TV series? Is that WOT? I've heard that it was coming out, but that it's not out yet. Oh, Game of Thrones. So, it's interesting. Rachel and I have been sort of doing our own thing the last few days. I've been kind of absorbed in my book, listening to, and she's been doing whatever. And I think it's fair to say that we're having both to adjust to that. There, a lot of still plenty of fear and uncertainty back in stuff, I guess. Yes, I did my live stream yesterday. Why? Well, I was listening to this book all day, and then I took a nap, and I just wasn't feeling it, I guess. Well, I plan to because when I first read the series was when I got to like book 7 or 8, and I had to wait for the next book to come out, and I just stopped reading at that point. I never, when the next book came out, I didn't get it because it's like I didn't have any momentum any longer. I need to have momentum. I totally want to start the 5th book right away, but I think I'm going to probably buy the actual book rather than get it on Audible, just because. First of all, on Audible it's super expensive, and second of all, it's I don't know. I like to read. I like to have the control of reading the book myself. Why would one find girls in relationships attractive? Uh, I thought maybe something had happened since you didn't live stream, and then I felt bad for predicting a pattern onto you. I just didn't feel like it, basically. I usually do live stream a lot, but you got to remember they're my medication cycles too. So I was off medication yesterday, and Yeah, I like binging my entertainment. If there's a delay, I, well, it's very frustrating experiencing what Rachel and I are now experiencing with Cobra Kai. We watched the first two seasons; they were fantastic, and we've been waiting for the third season ever since. I'm pretty sure it's in the can, but Netflix bought it out, and so they're going to release the first two seasons on Netflix before they release the third season on Netflix, and then we're going to have to get Netflix to watch it, and it's super annoying. You think it's mostly girls that find men in a relationship attractive? I mean, look, there are douchebag guys who like to show what studs they are um, by tempting girls in relationships, I guess. But I don't think that's um, I don't think that's anyway. Sometimes life can be hard. I find this whole shutdown 2.0 in California to be just it it breaks my soul. It's like we're still nowhere near or further than we have been for a while from anything resembling normality. It's like the amount of damage being wreaked is just astonishing, and the idiots in charge are not even aware of it. And it's just like, oh my god. Of course, all these horrible efforts, all these sacrifices, haven't done a damn bit of good. Well, just like I said, you know, it means like you can't go to any place. Everything it affects just about everything except takeout food places and grocery stores. Malls closed. All your retail shopping is closed. Barbershops closed. Um, of course, it's arbitrary. Grocery stores are retail shopping too, but what are you gonna do? People are stupid. It drives me crazy. Thanks for the advice, Word Mumbler. That's a good idea. I'll do that from now on. Right. Well, that's the problem with ill thought out policy advocacies like this. Um, is that they end up producing these totally arbitrary, contradictory kind of policies in different places, and it invalidates the whole notion behind the thing. Ask away, email Anthrax. Ask away. Ask to your little heart's content. That's what I'm going for in this live stream, is to have emailed Anthrax ask those little heart's content. Do I feel C.S. Joseph is wrong and where? Well, sure. I mean, if you look at his justifications for typing somebody meow meow meow, they're they're just woefully inadequate in lots of different ways. I mean, when anybody asks C.S. Joseph to justify his position or to explain why it is so, he'll direct them to read a certain book, or he'll simply say, well, my mentor indicated this to me. So you want me to negate C.S. Joseph's arguments? I would say he hasn't sustained any of them. He's not given adequate justifications for any of his positions at all. So why would we don't even need to negate him. He's failed to meet his burden. Well, that's good to know. Argument can you negate automatically? Well, I mean, look, he doesn't make very clear what his justifications or positions are, right? So what I'm telling you is that, I mean, the other thing is I haven't spent a lot of time watching him. I find him impossible. It's impossible to watch. He's talking out of his ass. You want me to negate him? I mean, just you have to give me some argument of his to negate, right? Say this is something this is one of C.S. Joseph's positions. Eric, do you agree with it or disagree with it? That's a meaningful question.
Yeah. Can they ask you like why not?
Well, sure. What I'm saying is, don't ask me to negate C.S. Joseph in general. If you believe that C.S. Joseph has a certain position you can articulate, then articulate it, and I'll tell you whether I agree with it or not.
Makes sense.
Oh yeah, I've talked about the type grid before in a video. Actually, I don't really remember it very well, but again, it's like one of those things where, okay, well, what's your justification for why should we conclude that these particular interaction styles correlate with the typings you said? Why? Define your terms. Let's get to the bottom of this. Well, that's where he provides nothing. He provides nothing. He provides no reasons for it. It's just an arbitrary statement. So you want me to negate the arbitrary statement? I mean, why are you affirming it? Why do we afford it any weight at all? It's arbitrary. It's not justified by anything. You know? How does he justify it? Why does he make the claim that these interaction styles link with these things? There's no explanations. There's nothing to negate. It's just an arbitrary claim. If you ask him where the justification for it is, he talks about some book he got it from. I mean, the man typed me as ESTP and himself as the ENTP. What more do you need to know than that?
Hi, everyone.
Rachel says hello to everyone. No, but thank you for the suggestion, Horsephone Board. Well, look, whether or not we can, the question is, what does somebody mean by the temperaments? So what you have to ask then is, okay, well, what is this thing you're talking about? Is it a process? Is it a descriptive taxonomy? Is it, again, okay, interaction styles. So what are the criterion by which we distinguish between these interaction styles is one element of the question, which presumably he provides some information about. The other element of the information of this model is why does it purportedly link to X or Y or Z? And there's not any explanation as to why. It's like, you know, if there's no linkage, then it doesn't matter, right? There might be interaction styles. It might be a descriptive taxonomy of behavior. C.S. Joseph doesn't know whether he's talking about a taxonomy, a process analysis, a model. He doesn't know. He has no idea. He doesn't know how to think properly. So, well, this is a point I keep trying to clarify on because people misunderstand me when I say it. Certainly, empathy has a role to play in morality. So the FI notion that everybody's feelings matter and that nobody should suffer is sort of is not really an expressed value or anything. but it seems to be kind of built into most healthy people that suffering causes them to cringe, at least, you know. However, it's not always the case with FI. So if I feel like I have my righteous vengeance and this person has slaughtered my family and I watch them suffer, I might take great pleasure in that. And that's FI too. So what we have to remember is that while the TI defense of the individual's rights comprises a validation of an implicit FI sense that everybody has experiential valuing, um, the actual distinction between what is ethical or moral cannot be determined with FI. In fact, it will lead us astray, because that which is moral is not always that which is appropriate for what you feel. You know, you might have a strong feeling that you like this person a lot, but you're in a relationship and you might go with your feelings. You're not doing what's moral. But I told you this model was based on recorded psychological information and cited the source. Well, what do you mean recorded psychological information? It still doesn't answer the question, what is it? Is it a model actually, or is it a taxonomy? If you're just saying it's a descriptive taxonomy, then it doesn't really matter because it doesn't make a link, right? Because Kanye West, who is an ENFP, and Kim Kardashian, who is an ISFJ, the perfect match. I think Kanye West is an ENFJ. Yeah. Pretty sure he is. So I'm not going to answer that question as phrased. Are they a perfect match, ENFJ and ISFJ? No. ISFJ is the supervisor of ENFJ.
That makes sense. It
makes
a lot of sense.
Where do you get value judgments for moral behavior from? TI only says everyone has to be treated equally, but that's about it. Values are provided by FI. Well, what I would say is that probably the urge towards mercy comes from FI. It's an FI thing, and that's a good thing. But so too does the urge towards vengeance, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if it's retributive justice. Why do I care about MBTI? I mean, what do you mean by care about? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'll go over this information with you and deduce where the argument can be valid and invalid. I mean, the problem you're going to run afoul of with CHS and with arguing about cognitive functions at all is that most people are ill-equipped to even begin arguing about cognitive functions because they don't understand what a cognitive function model is trying to do, what it's supposed to do, how to validate such a thing, or any of that matter. It's like you have to begin with the right questions. I think to properly understand it, you've got to accept and embrace the notion that we need to define fields, objects, and grammars accordingly, as though it were of course, darling, as though it were a metadata. You need to be asked, what do you mean by care about? Bro, you spend a lot of time on MBTI on your free will. I mean, you obviously care about MBTI. Well, I mean, I care about having conversations on the internet. This seems to be what most conversations I end up getting into are, but it's not like I brought up the issue of cognitive functions. I was talking about values in general. Are morals objective or subjective? Why or why not? Why not? Negative moral prohibitions are objective, and positive moral indications are subjective. It's easy and comfortable, pulls an audience you know that it interacts with. I mean, it's a good frame of reference. It's a good lexicographical tool to understand things in general. So since most of us here share that language, naturally it's going to be employed in discussions because it's a better metaframe than some other lexicographical tools, which is to say sets of words that we use to parse out and understand the world. If FI is that everyone should feel good about themselves, then this belief could lead the opposite effect if you can't deprioritize it. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what you mean there, but sure.
I've been studying the cognitive functions. I'm gonna work on it today, actually.
Is
Goals.
C.S. Joseph an ESTJ? I think he is.
I think he is too, because one of the things that made me think, I used to think he was an ENTJ, but then when he gave you crap for smoking weed, I was like, oh, he's definitely an ESTJ.
Do I think John Beebe is an ESFJ? I don't know. I have no idea. I've never really seen him talk or anything. I would suspect Beebe is some kind of NI down, probably an INFJ. He's got a very archetypal. He is this guy's got a very archetypal understanding of cognitive function.
Oh.
I like his understanding of front and back stack, but it uses metaphors like your witch function and your function.
Okay. Is the child one of them?
Yeah, I think so. Why would negative be objective? Because positive isn't the absence of negative. So a negative obligation is such like it is not morally permissible for me to stab you, for example, violate your bodily integrity. That's a negative moral prohibition. A positive moral indication or obligation is one where you have to do something. So, for example, if I go to McDonald's and I pay at the first window, I have a positive. McDonald's has a obligation, and I have a positive right to my food at the second window. After all, I paid for it, and they owe it to me. Okay, that's the difference between positive and negative obligations. Negative is that which you cannot do, and if you do it, then you incur the status morally impermissible. But the positive moral indications. Now, the thing is, there are positive rights, which are contractual positive moral indications, but there are also positive moral indications that are not rights-based understanding. So, for example, should I or should I not give money to this homeless person is a positive moral question for which there's only a subjective answer. There is no objectively universal answer for that. Whereas a negative moral obligation, it is always universal, that you can't violate somebody else's rights.
Which function I have to listen to this person, right? It kind of makes you like, you want to know. It's like, so I'm guessing he's using archetypes.
Yeah, archetypes for both stacks. Finito, I don't think it's true that we haven't gotten significantly further regarding morality since Immanuel Kant. I'm not a pure deontologist. I have, in fact, reconciled by essentially morality plus cognitive functions equals a superior frame of understanding morality. So we can understand Kant's ideas as a work product of a certain function stack. He's probably an INTP, maybe an ENTP. And we can understand how it's a defense of TI morality. But it's TI itself, remember, that is able to, TINE that's able to frame up and go, okay, well, now let's understand morality accordingly within a larger frame. So it's like the full parsing out that I provide you here, positive indications, positive obligations, negative moral obligations, and so forth, is not unrelated to Kant's deontological imperative. Certainly is linked to it, but it recognizes and respects the fact that universality is relative to its frame, whereas Kant did not understand and respect that, and that's a big difference. Well, I just explained it right there, Fenty Deluxe. That's a big difference, what I just said.
So then can we say the negative moral RTI and subjective are FI? Asks Running Fox.
Negative moral and subjective are FI. The subjective can be informed a lot by FI, for sure. But I think that the nature of FI means, yeah, probably. But the thing is, I guess that must be what you use to choose about positive moral indications. The problem with people using pure left brain logical logic to explain reality that any intuition is their limiting dumbassery. Who's doing that without any intuition? Not me. Can I explain demonstrative TE?
It's a good question.
Well, let's see. I think it plays out a little differently in the ESTP than it does in ENTP.
Can you explain the
Yeah, sure. ENTP goes metaphysical, metaphysical, metaphysical on the front stack. And so the TE is really in contrary to their nature. And it's extra counter value. In ESTP, since they start as a physical type, they are much more comfortable with their 6-slot function because they're used to, they like to see impacts in the physical world with their SE. So TE fits in with that, the how to attain impacts in the physical world, concrete impacts, so to speak. But basically, one of the aspects of having TE 6-slot is that when TI is inadequate, then the TE 6-slot person turns next to TE. So if my explanation for why something is correct is inadequate, then I have to explain how it's useful, or I have to actually use it for something. Intuition is precognition, knowledge with no detailed explanation. Opposite of you are, of course, you are intuitive in the MBTI sense, but only in that sense only. Okay, well, Cloud is burdened by the limits of 4th-slot NI. So we can see what 4th-slot NI looks like with Cloud. He comes in every day with a new passion for a new truth that he's excited about and is all puffed up about, and he insists that be everybody's truth from now on, oblivious to the fact that tomorrow he'll come up with the contrary and new truth again. And that's what it looks like when you've got intuition in the 4th-slot and you're physical. So he goes physical, physical, physical in its aspects, and lastly metaphysical. And so that's what 4th-slot NI looks like. Okay, yeah, you're right. In some sense, you're totally unburdened by intuition. That's true. You're very unburdened by real intuition.
That's why you have intuitive friends.
And you come in. No, he's not the same type as Taylor. Taylor's an ESTP, Cloud's an ESFP. And so it's like an ESFP is going to have even worse 4th-slot NI from an intuitive perspective than an ESTP because they don't have that 2nd-slot metaphysical.
So, like, I'm playing Subway Surfers, and right now they're in Scotland, and they have certain words that if you catch the letters and build the name, you get an extra prize. And today's name, or I should say word, that was used was cloud.
Oh, Cloud, you hear that?
Yeah.
What a lucky guy you are.
Hey, David Graham M.
I mean, I think you see what the combination of 4th-slot NI and polar TI look like, which is this notion that words can mean whatever you want them to mean, right? Like, no sane person evaluating my pile of work product would think that any reasonable definition of the word intuitive would exclude me, right?
Exclude you?
Yeah, it would exclude me. So that's what Cloud is saying. Basically, I'm non-intuitive. That's the thing. I don't have any real intuition. Of course, nobody who thinks words have meanings that stick beyond 5 minutes would conceive of stretching the definition of the term that much. And that's a combination of NI and polar TI, where it doesn't matter what words mean. The truth you're clinging to isn't based on definitions or words. It's a feeling. It changes from day to day, and you just link words to it kind of randomly. it makes it difficult to have a real conversation with such a person if you're talking about ideas, because they're going to continue saying, but my feelings, but they're going to use words to try to say that. But the words don't ever mean what they actually mean. All they really mean is, but my feelings. Like, Cloud doesn't know what right brain means or intuition means or whatever. He feels like, no, you're not creative, you're not intuitive.
Horse Mumbler 1, do you have any clouds that are shaped as a heart? Because I have a bucket list thing of finding a heart-shaped cloud in the sky.
Right brain, left brain stuff is untrue. Wives tell it we prefer one or two.
Some tests even show like percentages as to, if you use it equally or like one just a little bit more than the other. It's a quiz. It's like entertainment.
I mean, first of all, I don't think INFJ women are that common. They may be more common than INFJ men, but they're not that common. And I don't think that ESTP women are that uncommon, although they may be less common than ESTP men. I would suspect that there's still more ESTP women than INFJ men, and that there are still more ESTP men than INFJ women. So that both the INFJ types are going to be short of their ESTPs that they're looking for.
I was literally thinking about that this morning, about how, like, there's more.
You want to say it?
Please. How their ESTPs are more common. Than INFJ. And I was also thinking about ISFJ, INFJ, who are both TE polar, but one is the most common and the other is the least common. So TE polar is ISFJ, who is the most common, and INFJ, who is the least common. So I feel like our TE polars look different in the world because of the percentages of the types. Oh, the organ? That's even cooler, Horse Mumbler 1. I'm into that. ESFP equal unable to communicate with language? Ask Rafael Averos.
They can communicate. It's just, it's like they're not really trying to communicate conclusions that are used for further communication.
Oh my god. But it's funny, one of my friends used to demand that I talk about my life, basically. Although she shared stuff about her mom and her son and a little bit about her brothers, but I would definitely say that I was there to entertain her a lot. Rachel, have you noticed certain types that seem to approach you more for friendships than other types? If so, what ones? I've had a lot of ESFJ friends, ESFP friends. So I'd say in friendships, it's been ESFJ, ESFP, then ISFP. And yeah, it is interesting. But I now understand our relationships with each other much more. and because of learning like the cognitive functions and my type, I understand like those friendships a lot more. The value that should be rekindled is coalescence. What does coalescence mean?
It would mean the unification of multiple things into one, I guess.
I thought.
Or diffuse things into solid. The value that should be rekindled is coalescence. I use cognitiveprocesses.com in my cheat sheet. It uses a different language. I had heard that demonstrative is second. You say it's sixth? Yeah, demonstrative is sixth. Tool function is what I call second. The thing about the sixth swap function is it's very visible to other people. So if you were to ask third parties about my TE in a way that was fairly neutral about whether it's metaphysical or physical, most people would probably say I have good TE.
So, David Grant, do you find yourself conflicting with INFPs more than ISFPs? Yes. ISFPs like to tell me how to they like to give me practical advice every once in a while. But I'm always like, okay, look at your life. So I don't really take it so seriously. And Updom Please 48. I am going by research that I've done through Google. There's people who do, what do they call it, like studies, and they
yeah, if you look at most of the studies, they tend to suggest that sensors are more common. I would suggest, based on mistypings from other typing methodologies, that intuitives are even less common than is commonly said. Now, Raphael said he thinks it's dangerous to only interpret things through an MBTI frame or something. Well, look, cognitive functions are not the sort of thing that allows you to try to force anything into it. In fact, it's the only frame that says Raphael is expressing these opinions because of these following reasons. It includes the illocutionary plus the locutionary frame. It says Raphael is making TI arguments that can be interpreted as logical or illogical according to a certain frame of reference appropriately, and it's an appropriate context for that to be stated, but it's wrong because, in fact, the alternative is to just focus on the locutionary frame. In other words, the words being said and what they mean. So, in other words, we either have a more limited frame or a more maximally liberated frame. It's better to understand things as products of people for a reason rather than as ideas independent of people, which they never are. So it depends. If you favor reality, then you favor a broader frame. If you favor effectiveness, then you are subsumed by that frame, and your questioning of it is just an example of how one would normally expect you to behave accordingly.
And it's okay, David Grandin. No problem. Good catch, actually.
How does a tool differ from demonstrative? Tools what you want to be. Tools how you assume you're going to be able to solve everything. So, for example, when Rachel comes to me, the problem I have sometimes, and we've had in the past, is Rachel comes to me with FI, I'm feeling fear or something, and I take a TI approach and go, well, that's not logically consistent with the data, and I don't like that opinion, and blah, 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 right? Not understanding really that she's not expressing a position statement that she's articulating and defending. She's expressing a fear that she's experiencing. So in that instance, I use my tool function always, which is TI. If that doesn't work, then I'll probably switch to my demonstrative function, which is TE. I still won't exactly use FI, but I'll decide what to say or how to act based on the expected outcomes rather than correctness. MBTI deviates from real phenomenon. Okay, well, but see, it's not it. MBTI. Remember, Raphael, what you're saying is it's never good to have a map, and that's a silly notion. Is it never? Is it always Is it a bad idea to mistake the map for the territory? Sure. And is that possible anytime you have a map? Sure. Is it likely for every meta-analyst? Sure. But that's the opposite is true for the most physical types, the executors. So it's a weird statement to say MBTI deviates from real phenomena, because what you're really saying is understanding things deviates from experiencing them. Well, that's true and accounted for within a cognitive function frame.
I like it when you were talking about how you take the words and you put it like a frame to it, because that is exactly what you do.
Right.
It's like, and you like that's like comparatively, like when you say I walk a narrow path, like it just makes sense to me what you're talking about. I see that in you.
Right. I mean, the mistake a lot of people make is to think that using a tool of understanding is the same as describing a belief. And of course, those are very different things. I don't think of cognitive functions as something that one believes in or doesn't believe in. I understand it correctly. I say, well, one uses this lexicographical tool to better one's map overall, or to fail to better one's map overall. And those are really your only two choices. It's not like improving your map can never be a bad thing. If you're saying that, in fact, there's a map diminishment by increased understanding of cognitive functions, you're simply wrong.
I agree with Dave Grandam, and really, really has helped me with my relations and dealing with others. It's like puzzle pieces coming together, like, oh, that's why. Okay, so now I understand that we can have these conversations, but maybe not these conversations. And, if I do bring up something that they're not responsive to, I should expect that. It just helps so much. It really does. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I still get emotional, even knowing the person really well. Wishing things that were like different. But the truth is that when you accept it how it is, it's a lot easier to understand.
I'm not exactly sure how Socionics understands the ASLOC function. I understand it as an unconscious tool function. But it's always subsumed by your dominant. So my SE is active when it needs to be to enable my NE to happen. When it's no longer enabling that, it's difficult for me to muster any sort of willful control of it. I would also say that SE is a balanced function in some sense. It's the only function you don't do either too little or too excess. And it's the function in which you're most likely to think that when evil is wrought through that modality of attention, that it's especially evil, or that that's the source of the problems of the world.
Right.
So it's like, for an INFJ, they're going to think the source of the problems of the world, people knowing through their particularist means, when the universal is what ought to be prioritized. For the ENTP, I think evil happens when people act in the physical world before they've deliberated and acted enough in the metaphysical world. In other words, anytime SE undercuts my NETI process, I feel as though the wrong decision has been made. You prioritize the wrong form of action.
Yeah, look, there was a conversation that I had with my mom that I took the wrong way, and it hit my F5 for some reason, because like our memories weren't matching up, because she's TE Dom, and I'm TE Polar. So it was like a mismatch of misunderstanding, but like really understand it now as just miscommunication.
Well, Raphael, I'll be honest. It's difficult for me to drop the frame, so to speak. It's like if you're asking me to understand your behavior without um, without including the the ways in which understanding cognitive functions informs my thinking, that's challenging to do and not desirable. You wouldn't want to go back. It's like saying to somebody, "Now play this violin as though you know nothing, as though you don't have any musical experience. You never played it before. Now play it like a brand new person again." And I would say, well, I mean, first of all, even if I could accomplish that, in other words, return to a state of beginner, I wouldn't be better. I'd be worse at playing the violin, not better.
Right.
So I think you're failing to understand the dynamic of understanding cognitive functions. It's not like a frame that you impose on things as you wish it to be. It's a frame that reveals information about the things you experience in the world and the data you incorporate,
Yeah. Email anthrax, I honestly think having Eric as a mentor with the cognitive functions, he's done it the best for me. I mean, I'll show you what he drew. And, if you look at it closely, it says physical, internal, external, physical, and it points to,
it's
the
kind of a
types.
sloppy looking picture.
It's a pot.
It's a pot.
It's like a pot, and like Fi is moisture coming out. It's great. I don't know. I took a lot from it. So I say that ENTPs can be very good mentors when it comes to learning about the cognitive functions. I really do.
I mean, look, Raphael, you need to understand it like this. I read this thing right here. It's better to first look at the thing and then apply the frame instead of the other way around. And I immediately go through my ideational possible responses. Okay, well, he seems to be saying that there's an ordinality to this that I don't know where he drew that from. In other words, I never stressed that there was an ordinality to this. That, in other words, I'm applying the frame first and then experiencing the thing. It's unavoidable that the thing come before the frame. That's unavoidable. So, in other words, your words came out here, and I responded in what way I responded. I said, okay, but hear me, Raphael. Instead of fighting, listen and learn. Okay.
I have a website that.
So, but listen, Raphael. So, what I'm doing right now, I'm able to analyze my own self. I'm able to say, here's what I'm doing. I'm using a TI NE approach to responding to what you've put on an external metaphysical frame. Okay, and an external metaphysical field for us all to see and respond to. You've taken metaphysical action on an external metaphysical field. I've engaged it with NETI, as is my nature, and now I'm responding to it. The thing is, I don't have to understand what I'm doing. I can just be reflexive. I could just be reflexive. I do the same thing, but I wouldn't understand why or how I was doing it or what it meant. I wouldn't understand why or how you or I think differently. So, in other words, you're making a mistake of thinking that because I understand better, that I must be constrained. That's not correct. It's frankly incorrect.
I'm gonna put a link for a good website that I know for people who are interested in the cognitive functions.
Eric, is Rachel liking you? Evidence that she's more like the INFJ over ENFJ or ENFP. I think our long-term sustainability as a couple is indicative of INFJ rather than ENFJ or ENFP.
Oh my gosh.
ENFP, we would be broke up a long time.
Yeah.
ENFP and I would not last for very long.
Yeah.
ENFJ and I would probably last longer, but I think I just, I don't think we'd see eye to eye forever, ENFJ and I. Have you ever watched Scott Morgan, who sadly hasn't made a video in recent times, I believe? I've never watched Scott Morgan, even though you're asking that question of email anthrax.
So I just put it on ISTP with the link, but as you go down, you scroll down, you see all the different types. I don't know. You see that box? It'll say all the different types, and then it'll show you the 8 different cognitive stacks, and it also has that website also goes through the different cognitive functions as they are used in the world. So it's a good it's a good website for me to use.
You're a good co-host.
Thank you, Bay. I think you're the best host.
How much would I charge for lessons? You mean like lessons on how to type people or on understanding cognitive functions? I mean, we could meet and you can pick my brain for a while for free, and we'll see what we think about it. Okay, I never really thought about teaching it, but I'd be happy to answer. To spend an hour with you, no cost. You just answering the questions if you have some questions, or going over the gist. It might help me sort of put it all together in my own head anyway. Might be useful for me. So that'd be fine. By their fruits, you will know them. You talking about fruit trees?
You use the same site, Dan Black. That's great. You call it. It helps me. It helps me a lot, especially when I was making charts for myself. Because it's funny. I know the stacks that I know, which are like mostly you, me, and ESTP. And a little bit of ISFJ because that's like in our lives.
Mm-hmm. And ISTP.
And ISTP. Well, not really. I had to look it up.
Cognitive functions are probably incapable to completely reason human behavior. I think that a cognitive function process model by itself would not produce as divergent examples among personality types as we see. And I would suggest that divergence among a given type stems from an enneagram, the other element that explains things is an enneagram.
Yeah,
and if you have those two combined, I think you basically got most of life covered. The only thing I can think of that doesn't really get explained exactly by either of those things is faith-based behaviors, God stuff,
Yeah, but actually,
you could call it NI.
It's interesting because a lot of faith-based people use Enneagram in their teachings. You go online, there's a lot of Christian sites that use Enneagram as a tool to understanding.
But what I'm saying is, I don't feel like the combination of Enneagram and cognitive functions, if it explained most of human behavior, then you'd be able to say the following types are most likely to have faith-based stuff in their lives, and the following types least likely, and that would be correct and predictable. But I believe that in fact that behavior is spread so broadly among people of different types that there's not really any good explanation for it that I have. But beyond that, I think basically everything in life is explained by a combination of Enneagram and cognitive functions. This is clogged. So clogged. It's like somebody took a professional clogging machine and clogged this.
Oh no, that's all I have. Oh, I think we have some chopsticks too.
This will work. There we go.
Ooh, smell of that.
I don't know if any of you have ever seen a professional clogging machine before, but boy, can it clog. Well, Raphael is I guess pushing on the legitimacy of or prescriptive indication of or something the the idea that cognitive functions often incorporate too much of your frame or something like that. But well, see, I don't know. If I'm right that NI is responsible for faith, then you would suggest that the ESTJs and ESFJs are the least faith-based. But I just don't think that anything really links that clearly to faith-based behaviors. If you look at the populations of people who engage in faith-based behaviors, I don't think it's mostly intuitives. I think it's probably as many sensors as it is intuitives. So it's hard to explain it. When someone's an emotional vampire, has that behavior connected to any system? Any behavior is not connected to the system. Tell me. Okay, well, the thing is, there are two elements of any ontology: the particularist and the universalist. So you have aspects of the self that are reflective of a pattern of self that doesn't change, and then you have experiences that inform that pattern of self, and which will produce either more or less, which will produce behavior that is an expression of either, for example, trauma or other particular experience that cause the pattern to manifest in certain ways that maybe are particularly unhealthy, but nevertheless are not desirable. So it's true that particularist experience is part of the cognitive function understanding and acknowledges that it informs the manifestation of the self that the external world sees. You say yet gonna take a bath. Is taking a bath a TESE step in changing your SI? Taking a bath is SI, basically. But of course, the thing is, taking a bath is an action. The question of whether or not something is SI, you need to remember that SI is an intentional manner, that one is paying. So if when I'm taking a bath, I'm paying attention to how good the water feels and how to get all my parts of my body clean and stuff like that, then I'm paying attention by SI. If I'm bathing on autopilot and thinking about philosophy stuff, then I'm really paying attention by NE, not SI, even though I'm doing an SI action. But remembering that the cognitive functions are ways of paying attention helps us to recall that those ideas of things being SI or NE or TI or whatever like that, that's kind of a metaphor. Hollaback, Lauren
Brian, and hey, Octavia Silva. We've been talking about the cognitive functions.
Same personality is a generalized state rather than specifically state where it lies exactly within the person. To be that exactly isn't as useful. Remember, the personality means aspects of the self that don't change over time. That's what distinguishes it from affect or manner or something like disorder or order. If I'm roller skating, having less time, think less time, is it SI over SE? Now, if you are roller skating and not really thinking at all, but just focused on your action of roller skating, that's mostly SE.
We saw that in Delilah. Literally roller skating.
And we also, I've heard it from an INFJ I checked recently, and somewhat from Rachel as well, that when the INFJ wants relief from themselves, so to speak, they go out and they do mindless action, like roller skating, riding a bike, or stuff like that, and then it helps them to not think so much.
Yeah, I'll take a walk and listen to my music. It definitely takes me out of myself.
Well, I would say, Raphael, if you understand cognitive functions, then you have a much better chance of understanding how and why the person who you're dealing with is understanding the world differently than you are. I think my daughter's FI polar affected negatively or positively. It affected our relationship positively.
Yeah.
Like Rachel was commenting on this the other day that neither Delilah or I ever get our feelings hurt from not hearing from the other one or anything like that. Whereas most people are a little more sensitive than that. But see, Raphael, you're ignoring what I'm saying and replacing it with something you think sounds worse. Okay? So what I'm saying, though, is I'm not talking about attributes. I'm saying when somebody has behaved in a certain way, one can understand that in terms of their cognitive function stack. Okay? That's very different than what you said, isn't it? So, in other words, it's possible to take your language and understand it in a more simple or in a less simple way, a more nuanced way or a less nuanced way. Raphael, you're saying that understanding things in a more nuanced way is bad. And I'm pointing out that you're wrong. This is frustrating you, and your FI is leading you to continue to drive the argument even though it's already lost. And that's what I call doubling down. It's like when I get so mad at people doubling down, what I really mean is I get mad when people allow their FI to get in the way of TI. And that's the frustration I'm going to experience because of my cognitive function stack. So I understand both myself and you in this situation better because of cognitive functions. Now I have to go because I have work at 2 o'clock and it's 1:55 right now. So I'll see you all later. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, see you later.
Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.
Don't.